So I just watched that exchange, and I have to say, it perfectly captures why Americans have to pay close attention to what is happening in Washington. Before we get into it, welcome back to the Political Brief. If you're tired of the mainstream media leaving out key details and you want honest conservative analysis of the biggest political stories shaping America, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Give this video a thumbs up and let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Do you think Congress is focusing on the right priorities when it comes to public safety and immigration? I read as many of your comments as I can, and I'd love to hear where you stand.
Ms. Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I too very sincerely want to express my condolences to Mrs. Gorman and to Mr. Abraham. What happened to your children should never have happened. And Mrs. Gorman, I look forward to sitting on the bench. I do want to share because I know every single one of my police chiefs and I know my sheriff. I do want to share how important it is that our local law enforcement get funding and get grants so they can prevent crimes, respond to crimes, and make sure our communities are safe. And that is from everybody who commits crimes. Illegal immigrants, legal immigrants, American citizens. We need to make sure we give our law enforcement at the local level, closest to the community, the tools that they need. And every single time I can get a community project for my local law enforcement, I do it. I am, however, very concerned that the Trump administration has stopped some of the grants to local law enforcement to help hire new officers, to get the equipment that they need. I understand that we now have unprecedented investment in ICE and CBP, and that there's a whole lot of hiring and bonuses. My local law enforcement sometimes loses some of their best people to ICE and CBP, but it's a free country, and take the job that you think you should be doing. I think that's fine. But I want to know a little bit more about these grants. And I was concerned, Ms. Pierce, I didn't know you were going to mention that North Carolina, which is my home state, was one of the states that hasn't gotten grants. We're not a sanctuary city state. So could you talk a little bit more about the grants that my state's lost? Because we're not doing the things that my friends on the other side of the aisle claim are so bad.
Absolutely. So the grants I mentioned that have been delayed, the fiscal year 2025 grants, the $4.5 billion that should have been given out more than 9 months ago, they actually should be going to every single state in the country. I was listing in my testimony the countries represented by the majority on this committee because I think that this is a real issue.
The states, you mean?
I'm sorry, the states, thank you.
Yeah.
Represented by the majority on this committee because I think this is a real and important issue that this committee should be examining. But every single state in the United States is missing public safety grant funding that should have been given to them more than 9 months ago.
And could you tell me what that grant funding would go toward?
So funding from the Office of Justice Programs goes to a wide variety of resources that help protect local safety. They go to law enforcement officers to help with hiring, to help with officer training, to help with officer wellness. They also go to organizations out in the community that help represent individuals. It also goes to organizations that help prevent gun violence, a variety of issues, all designed to increase public safety in the United States.
Okay, and I wanted to ask, I only have about a minute and a half, but you briefly mentioned how there's been diversion from child exploitation cases. Could you explain how agents have been pulled off of child exploitation cases?
Absolutely. So Homeland Security Investigations is a wing of ICE. Unfortunately, this administration has pulled many of the individuals who specialize in the specific crimes that HSI focuses on to instead focus on immigration enforcement, and that includes individuals focused on child exploitation cases. These are very specialized agents that work on these cases, when they leave them, the cases can't just be like picked back up at a later time. Instead, the evidence gets outdated, more children are vulnerable to exploitation, and predators get longer to work on them. So it's extremely concerning that this administration would pull investigators from those cases.
And have they been pulled from human trafficking cases?
Yes, absolutely. So Homeland Security investigations, which has lost so many agents to instead focus on civil immigration enforcement, also focuses on human trafficking, drug smuggling, cartels, a variety of issues that are very important to the public safety of the United States.
Okay, thank you, and I yield back.
Generally yields back. Mr. Moore.
Now, let's talk about what we just watched. Congresswoman Deborah Ross opened by expressing sympathy to the families who had suffered unimaginable tragedies, and that's something every decent American can agree with. Families who lose loved ones because of violent crime deserve justice, compassion, and answers. But then the discussion quickly shifted into federal grants for local law enforcement, and this is where things started getting interesting. Ross argued that local police departments need more funding to hire officers, improve training, purchase equipment, and keep communities safe. She also claimed that some officers are leaving local departments for better-paying jobs with IC and Customs and Border Protection because of the current administration's hiring push. Now, let me stop right there. As a conservative, I absolutely support giving local law enforcement the resources they need. Our sheriffs, deputies, and police officers are often the first people responding when Americans dial 911. They deserve competitive pay, proper equipment, and strong support from every level of government. But here's the question nobody seems eager to ask. Why are IC and Border Patrol suddenly hiring so aggressively in the first place? Because for years, America allowed the border crisis to spiral out of control. Millions of illegal crossings overwhelmed federal agencies. Drug trafficking exploded. Human smuggling expanded. Cartels made billions. Entire communities felt the impact. You don't solve that overnight. If IC and CBP are rebuilding their workforce now, that's because enforcing immigration law requires manpower. Conservatives have been saying this for years. Secure borders don't happen through speeches. They happen through personnel, technology, and enforcement. Now, Ross expressed concern that some local grants haven't been distributed, and if those grants were legally approved by Congress, then yes, every administration has a responsibility to administer taxpayer dollars according to the law. That's a fair oversight question for Congress to ask. But here's where I think the conversation became one-sided. The witness suggested that because Homeland Security investigations has shifted resources toward immigration enforcement, investigations into child exploitation, human trafficking, drug smuggling, and cartel activity are suffering. Those are serious claims. If true, they deserve careful review because nobody wants child predators or traffickers escaping justice. However, what wasn't mentioned is that illegal immigration and human trafficking are deeply connected. The southern border isn't simply about people crossing illegally. Cartels move fentanyl. Cartels traffic women. Cartels exploit children. Cartels force migrants into labor. Cartels make billions from organized crime. So when IC focuses on immigration enforcement, it's not necessarily choosing immigration over public safety. In many cases, immigration enforcement is public safety. That's a distinction that often gets ignored. Think about it. Every human trafficking network starts somewhere. Every smuggling operation crosses borders. Every cartel relies on weak enforcement. If America regains operational control of its borders, you make life harder for criminal organizations before they ever reach American neighborhoods. That's something conservatives have consistently argued. Another thing that caught my attention was the repeated emphasis on grants as the solution. Government funding certainly helps, but money alone doesn't solve crime. Cities that spend enormous amounts on policing can still experience high crime if prosecutors refuse to prosecute violent offenders. Communities become safer when criminals know there are consequences. Law enforcement matters. Courts matter. Prosecutors matter. Immigration enforcement matters. Strong families matter. All of those pieces work together. Unfortunately, Too often Washington debates only one piece of the puzzle. I also found it interesting that the witness framed nearly every reduction in staffing as a negative consequence of immigration enforcement. But let's remember what voters demanded. Americans watched years of record border crossings. Communities across the country dealt with overwhelmed shelters. Fentanyl deaths reached heartbreaking levels. States pleaded for federal action. Parents became concerned about public safety. The electorate responded by demanding stronger border enforcement. That's democracy. When voters change priorities, administrations naturally shift resources toward those priorities. That doesn't mean every decision is perfect. It doesn't mean Congress shouldn't provide oversight. But pretending immigration enforcement somehow exists separately from public safety simply isn't accurate. They're connected. Another point worth discussing is the concern that officers are leaving local departments for federal jobs. Honestly, that tells me something important. Federal agencies are offering compensation and benefits attractive enough to recruit experienced officers. Rather than criticizing federal hiring, perhaps Congress should ask why local departments struggle to compete. Maybe it's funding. Maybe it's local politics. Maybe it's anti-police rhetoric in some jurisdictions over the last several years that drove officers away from the profession altogether. Remember when many politicians supported cutting police budgets? Remember when officers were publicly demonized? Remember when retirements surged? Conservatives warned that those policies would create recruitment problems. Now departments nationwide are struggling to fill vacancies. Actions have consequences. And finally, let's address the broader issue. This hearing reflects two very different philosophies. One side tends to believe that increasing government grants and redistributing resources is the primary solution. The other side believes that restoring law and order starts with enforcing existing laws, securing the border, backing police officers, prosecuting criminals, and removing dangerous illegal aliens who shouldn't be here in the first place. Neither side is saying child exploitation investigations aren't important. No conservative wants those investigations weakened. In fact, conservatives generally support harsher penalties for predators and traffickers. The real debate is about priorities and whether securing America's borders ultimately strengthens every other aspect of public safety. From my perspective, it absolutely does. You can't have national security without border security. You can't effectively fight cartels while allowing their transportation routes to remain open. You can't seriously combat human trafficking if criminal organizations can move people across borders with relative ease. So while Congress should absolutely ensure local police have what they need, America also cannot afford to back away from immigration enforcement after witnessing the consequences of years of weak border policies. Strong local police, strong IC, strong border patrol, strong prosecutors, strong communities. Those ideas don't compete with one another. They reinforce one another. At the end of the day, Americans deserve safe neighborhoods, secure borders, and a justice system that puts innocent families before criminals. That's not a partisan goal. It should be an American goal. But what do you think? Did Congresswoman Ross raise legitimate concerns about local law enforcement funding? Or do you believe the administration is right to prioritize border security and immigration enforcement given everything that's happened over the past few years? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to The Political Brief, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next political analysis. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.